All right. Well, welcome to Digging Deeper Daily. Good to have you with us tonight. We're going to be in Hosea chapter 11, and we're going to take a look at what we're shooting for here is verses 8 through 11. That's the key segment of the Bible study. You know what? I'm going to pause here real quick, and I'm going to say Donna just came on, but Andy Hill is on. That's Lori's brother-in-law in Wisconsin. Everyone say hi to him. And Bill Hanna. Bill is an acquaintance from quite a long time ago. Haven't seen much of him, but he's on tonight, so I just want to make sure that I say hi to all of them. All right, now let's get started. All right, let's start that over. So tonight we're going to be in the book of Hosea, chapter 11. And we're going to talk about the first 3 verses in particular, but what we're shooting for is verses 8 through 11. That's the core of this chapter, and that's what we really want to get to. You might notice that the title is How Can I Give Them Up? And while the first 6 chapters had some specific things to talk about, chapters 7 through 10, God lined out his case against his people, why he was going to discipline them and bring them into line with his thinking. So 7 through 10 tells us what the people were doing, but chapter 11 tells us the heart of God. And here's a question that I want you to think about as we do this study tonight. I want you to have this question on your mind. What does my rebellion do to God? You know, we always think of these questions in terms of ourselves. What does my rebellion do to me? Well, it separates me from God. It costs me my salvation. It costs me my relationship with God. But tonight we're going to find out what it does to God. And that's really interesting stuff. But let's start in chapter 11, verse 1. When Israel was a youth, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. The more they called them, the more they went from them. They kept sacrificing to the Baals and burning incense to idols. Yet it is I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them in my arms, but they did not know that I healed them. I led them with cords of a man, with bonds of love, and I became to them as one who lifts the yoke from their jaws, and I bent down and fed them. So this is God establishing his relationship, his love for his people. So there's 2 things in here that I want to point out. First of all, he calls Egypt Ephraim. So what is Ephraim, or who is Ephraim? Well, Ephraim is one of the sons of Joseph. There were 12 tribes of Israel. And there's no tribe of Joseph in the nation of Israel. Likewise, there's no territory for the land of the Levites. There's a tribe, but those are the temple priests. They weren't allotted a land. So there were only 10 tribes that were allotted lands. So Joseph was divided into his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So those were the 11th and 12th tribes of Israel. So Ephraim, the name Ephraim becomes over time associated with this rebellious spirit, with the evil that lurks in Egypt, because this is where a lot of their evil comes from. And so whenever you see the name Ephraim, it's God referring to the sinful nature of his people. So that's where this comes from. But I want to go back to chapter 11, verse 1, and see where it says, when Israel was a youth, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Now, where have you heard that before? You've heard that before without looking at the book of Hosea, haven't you? You've probably read that in the book of Matthew, in chapter 2. After the wise men came to visit Jesus, Herod set out to kill all of the children with an age of 2 years or younger. And Joseph and Mary fled the area into Egypt. Now, here's what Matthew says about that. In Matthew chapter 2, verse 14, he writes, so Joseph got up and took the child and his mother while it was still night and left for Egypt. He remained there until the death of Herod. And listen to this. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So there it is in the book of Hosea. Now, there's a slight problem with this, I might say, in that I've talked with other pastors and theologians and biblical scholars about this in the past. Matthew, his way of applying the Old Testament to the New Testament just seems odd to me. It just, like, this clearly Hosea 11 is not talking about the Messiah. He's just saying that when my people were slaves in Egypt, I called them out of Egypt. And Matthew is saying, well, this is fulfilled in what Jesus said. Well, in what sense? Because clearly Hosea is not predicting something about the Messiah, but Jesus is fulfilling something in the people of God. So to understand this, let's look at 3 verses in the New Testament that kind of show us how the Old Testament views the Old Testament scriptures. Let's go first to Hebrews. I'm going to be in chapter 8, and I believe I'm going to be in verse, what verse is it? I put my bookmark in here, but I don't remember what verse we're in. We are in chapter 8, verse 5. Okay. So the writer of Hebrews is talking about the temple, the priesthood and sacrifices and things. And he refers to them this way. He talks about the priests, he says, who serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. Just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the tabernacle, for see, he says, that you make all things according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain. Now, why is he so concerned about Moses being so detail-oriented to even worry about the minutest of things? Because it's a copy of what exists in heaven. It's a shadow of what exists down the road. The temple is there to teach us something about God. Likewise, the book of Hosea, the adultery of Hosea's wife teaches us something about the people of God and their relationship with him. So the prophets don't always out and out predict the future. Sometimes they reveal the future by by what they're saying about the prophets and about the people of God. Now, in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 1, this is what the writer of Hebrews says about the law. For the law, since it has only a shadow of the good things to come, and not the very form of things, can never, by the same sacrifices which they offer continually year by year, make perfect those who draw near. So, the much of the Old Testament is just a shadow of what is to come. Now, if you remember when we went through the book of Colossians in chapter 2, we talked at one point sorry, I'm going to try and limit those as I get over my cold. I don't have a cough button or anything. I apologize for that. Colossians chapter 2, verse 16, we talked about this when we went through Colossians, that are we supposed to observe the Sabbath and the festivals and the feasts? And here's what Paul writes about that. Therefore, no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day, things which are a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. So, the way the New Testament writers looked at the Old Testament is that everything was a type of something to come later. Now, you remember in the book of Luke, after the resurrection, Cleopas and the other disciple were traveling the road to Emmaus. And Jesus shows up and he walks along beside them. And he says, he has a conversation with them. Where are you going? What's going on? Well, are you the only one that doesn't know what's happened? And ironically, Jesus was the only one who did know what had happened. But they suddenly, their eyes are opened after Jesus sat them down and explained all the things in the scriptures that applied to him. Wouldn't that be a wonderful moment to be sitting in on, to just to sit there and listen to Jesus explain how the Old Testament prefigures him, how Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah were just a type of the crucifixion, how King David had a heart after God's own, and he's a king after, or Jesus is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. All of these things in the Old Testament that show us who Jesus is going to be. So I wanted to deal with those two things. I was right. It took longer than 5 minutes to go over those verses, but I want to get to verse 8, because verses 5 through 7, Hosea writes that God's people are not going to turn back. They're being called to turn back, but they're not going to. So they're going to be punished. And it's a merciful type of punishment. God could either abandon them or discipline them back into shape and rework them like a broken, like you're making a pottery out of clay. You misform it, so you just mold it back into a clump and rebuild it, right? So he could either abandon them or discipline them and work with them again. And he said, I will never leave you or forsake you. So that only leaves one option. If they're going to be rebellious and stubborn and chase after false gods, they have to be disciplined and reworked. So that's what he's doing. But listen to the heart of God here. And this is where I want this to land, is listen to the heart of God. As God almost, it would be heretical to say that God is conflicted inside, because there's no conflict in God. But listen to the heart of God pour out about having to discipline his child, Israel. He says in verse 8, how can I give you up, O Ephraim? How can I surrender you, O Israel? How can I make you like Admah, and how can I treat you like Zeboim? My heart is turned over within me. All my compassions are kindled. I will not execute my fierce anger. I will not destroy Ephraim again, for I am God and not a man, the Holy One in your midst, and I will not come in wrath. They will walk after the Lord. He will roar like a lion. Indeed, he will roar, and his sons will come trembling from the west. They will come trembling like birds from Egypt and like doves from the land of Assyria, and I will settle them in their houses, declares the Lord. Now, that is the heart of God, right at the onset of disciplining his people because of their rebellion and their stubbornness. So there is grace in the Old Testament. Even before Christ walked this earth, there was grace. There was love and mercy. God's love always overpowers his wrath. His wrath is real. His wrath has to be met. It has to be just, but he has mercy and he has grace, and he pours out his compassion on us even when we don't deserve it. That's the beautiful part of this. So now let's get back to that question that we asked at the beginning. The question is, if that's what Israel's rebellion did to God, what does your rebellion do to him? That he sent his son to die on the cross for you, that he took away your sins, he covered you with his blood, he brought you back to God, he redeemed you, delivered you, saved you, and you still rebel? You still openly sin in his presence? What does that do to God's heart? He said, my heart is turned over within me, and all my compassions are kindled. Have you ever had a loved one turn on you? husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, son, daughter, mother, father. If you ever had a good friend just turn on you and I'm so sorry. Have you ever had somebody like that turn on you and you just feel it in here, like your stomach just churns, it turns over because of the pain and the angst that is stirring within you because of what they did? That's what God is feeling. That's what he wants you to know, that that's what your sin does to him. So we're going to leave that here. We're going to come back tomorrow. We're going to take a look at verse 14, one of the most poetic portions of all of Old Testament or all of ancient literature, and we'll read that and see where this ends up. So, all right, everybody. Sorry for the cold. I'm sorry. I'm not getting over it quick enough. But it's good to see you all here tonight. We appreciate you all for being here, and we'll see you here next time on Digging Deeper Daily. God bless.